And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Friday, December 20th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by DK. We're brought to you by the Celebration promo code. And by celebration, I mean celebrate. And if you type in celebration, you're not going to get the discount. If you type in celebrate, you can get our NFL Max package all the way through the Super Bowl for $179. Had to do a little celebration here. This time I'm using the correct word because we picked up at least our third Millie winner this year. I feel like it's 4. Jordan told me it was 3, but it's Jordan. How confident can I be in his facts? So let's just go with 4 and round it up from 3. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both on Twitter. What's going on, man? We got a gem today.
Yeah, I was saying, man, 3-game slate. This is a really ugly one, but it's weird because Fridays are usually like a lot of games, only 3 games today and like a lot of games tomorrow. It's ugly. We got to talk about the Hornets a lot, unfortunately, but hey, there's good size contests. So, there's always money to be made.
Yeah, we do have to talk about the Hornets, and like the guys that we're talking about aren't exactly guys that it's exciting to see. There's so much for a 3-game slate. There's a crazy amount of value today.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think there are some interesting pivots there too. We'll get to, but I guess ready to break it all down.
And we got a monster on Monday. That'll be the biggie. 14 games. DraftKings will probably do 11, I think.
That's the one before Christmas Eve, right? So then there's the day off, and Christmas. Okay. Yeah.
Another December day off in the NBA DFS streets, and then I guess once we get back from Christmas, I don't think we get anything. I think it's just full steam ahead.
Yeah, I know I think there's a Millie Maker the 27th. I want to say for NBA. So
Friday after Christmas.
Friday,
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want a low dollar one or a high dollar one.
High dollar one. I think it's 2,500.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll probably enter it. I've entered like 6, I think, throughout my career, and I'm 0 for 6. So I know I'm going to lose. But the last one I actually had like a really good lineup last year, and it was a day where SGA was out. I don't even remember like Dagnall like at times would not give J-Dub and Chet extended run when SGA was out. And that was a day also where Chet got like 5 fouls in 15 minutes, just completely ended me. So yeah, it was not fun.
Anytime I've ever taken shots at any of the higher dollar stuff, it never goes well. Mm-hmm. It's just, I cross my fingers and hope that I sneak over that cash line. The amount of times that I can remember like bubbling and being 2 out or 3 out is way more than I wish that it was.
Yeah, I literally bubbled that day with Chet, like who was like low on giving me like 15 feints once. He fouled out in like 10 minutes or something. It's brutal.
It's brutal. Almost as brutal as talking about the Charlotte Hornets today, because they're not looking good. I'd love to know what this line would have been like if they weren't playing Philly. Like, obviously, this version of Philly is good-ish, but like if this were Cleveland or Boston, we would be having a real conversation about 18, 19, close to 20 points, because the only good players that exist for Charlotte aren't playing today. And I guess we might as well start there.
I guess we have
no LaMelo Ball. Charlotte, 13-point dogs in Philly, 214 total. So lowest total and lowest pace, at least based on, total is what you guys see. Pace is what I calculate. No LaMelo Ball, no Trey Mann, no Brandon Miller. Obviously, Grant Williams out, and Mark Williams out for this one. Injury management. Must be tough to come back from an 18-minute performance and come back out here the next day, but whatever you got to do. So those injuries are creating the following ownership numbers on some of these guys. 35% on DraftKings, 50% on FanDuel to Vasily Micic. So we're back on this game again. 50% on DraftKings, 40% on FanDuel for Miles Bridges. Cody Martin, oddly, 5% on DraftKings, 25% on FanDuel. Seth Curry is 60+ across both sites. Nick Richards snuck into 15% on DraftKings. Salon got to 10% on FanDuel. And no matter how many people end up out for the Charlotte Hornets, No one wants to roster Josh Green, 3% on DraftKings. We'll have a conversation about that. Let's lead it off with the guy pulling the most ownership, the exact way we expected to handle a day today. We're going to talk about Seth Curry, flat min 3K shooting guard on DraftKings, 3,600 shooting guard on FanDuel, played big time minutes yesterday in Brandon Miller's spot after essentially not playing for ages. Do you like Seth Curry today? Because he's not a great per minute dude. We really need him to get the minutes. And they've got a lot of other guys that aren't very good that could take those minutes, but it feels like you should be getting some. I don't know how much I want 70% owned Seth Curry.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think he's going a bit over-owned right now just because, I mean, the Hornets have a lot of body still, even though they're relatively shorthanded today. They still, like, if things get out of hand, like, they have guys they can throw minutes at the end of the game. So the ownership on Seth Curry scares me a bit. I don't even think he is like a guaranteed to start either. Like, he doesn't have to. He started last game, but we've seen like Salon start games before, so like he could move in the starting lineup. But yeah, if Seth Curry starts, I think he's definitely a solid value, 3K. Should play probably at least 20 minutes or so with upside of more. But I think the ownership is just a little bit high right now for his chance of success. Plus, you have a lot of other, reasonable pivots, I guess, on the cheap end. So totally fine value play, but I think probably going a little bit over-owned.
Yeah, we've got reasonable pivots on the cheap end from Charlotte. We've got 2/3 of Milwaukee providing value. A couple other guys from some other teams that could certainly work in that realm. Now, don't get me wrong. If he's starting, I understand why he's going to get a lot of ownership. He has a point per dollar play on a 3-game slate with the ability to pay down and unlock your Joel Embiids, your Giannis's, your anybody from Cleveland's, your Shea's, your Butlers, your Bams type players. Like, yeah, if you pay down, you're going to get more of those dudes. And if you get Seth Curry in the starting lineup, like I assume we do, I understand why it's happening. 70 feels a little lofty given the amount of different 3K guys we can get to, but it's hard to see, or it's hard to have too much of a problem with at least why it's happening. I don't want to say safer name to click on, but the one that at least doesn't make me nervous is Miles Bridges. He's 6,300 on DraftKings. He's 7,100 on FanDuel, which isn't the most fun price tag, but he's kind of the only guy left with a pulse on this Charlotte team. Maybe that's not a good thing for him because they can just focus on him, but he's pulling 50% ownership on DraftKings. That's the second highest mark of anybody on the Hornets. That one makes the most sense to me because at least he's, I don't know, above average offensively, which is it's not a high bar here for Charlotte.
Yeah, he's like one of the few like rotation pieces that's actually healthier for the Hornets. 6,300 is a reasonable price point. As you said, he's getting good chunk ownership coming in around 50%. But if this game stays competitive, you probably know why. Like Bridges is going to need to have a pretty good game. The downside, I will say, is the minutes haven't been like amazing. 28, 32 minutes for the last couple games. So I don't really think we have like 35 plus minutes in the range outcomes for Bridges. We haven't seen it yet, at least. They've been relatively conservative on the minutes, but relatively small sample size with LaMelo and Brandon Miller off the court. He's a 1.2 fantasy point per minute player. Again, he should be kind of leading the team in usage for sure. Probably going to do a little bit more playmaking as well. So yeah, totally understand why he's getting some ownership. And then Vasilij Micić is the other one that's getting a lot of love. Expecting him to start. He's 4K. With LaMelo Ball off the court this year, he's got about a 35% assist percentage, which makes sense when you look at the rest of this roster. They just don't really have a ton of other ball handlers out there. So Micić, I think, is a pretty good value play. Like, I personally feel better if both Micić and Seth Curry start. Like, I feel just a lot better about Micić. I think he just has a higher floor plus ceiling than Seth Curry.
I agree. I have Misic's optimal rate quite a bit higher than Curry's. I have his boom rate quite a bit higher than Curry's. I expect him to play more minutes than Seth Curry in that scenario too. So I'm with you. Like, Micić to me is like the guy just a half step behind Bridges, at least in terms of what I'm expecting out of him today. Bridges is at least the guy that has some talent. Micić, not so much, but minutes will carry me here. Assists will certainly help out a bit. So we hit the three guys that are pulling the crazy ownership. How do you want to sift through the center situation with no Mark Williams, I think the consensus is going to be that Nick Richards is going to start this game. He's 5,100, 15% owned. And then Moussa Diabate would take up probably most-ish of the backup center run. He's only 3,200, but he's also not a very good per minute guy, not really grabbing any ownership. Are you interested in Richards and or Diabate, or are you going to go off the beaten path and call it a Taj Gibson day?
Well, that's honestly what I was going to bring up, because I was like, oh, if Taj Gibson wasn't on this roster, like, okay, they're for sure going to split the full 48, but I would not be surprised if they throw a few minutes, they dust off Taj Gibson and throw a few minutes out there to try to defend Embiid, assuming Embiid plays. But yeah, neither of these centers are getting much love. Richards around 15%, as you mentioned. I think he's an interesting tournament play. We've seen a couple games this year where he's pushed for about 30 minutes against Philly. Actually, earlier in December, he played 30 minutes for 47 fantasy points. So I think Nick Richards is a relatively decent contrarian play here with a ceiling. Obviously, there would be some foul concerns if Embiid plays. And then Diabate as the backup, I think will play a good chunk of the backup minutes. Maybe not all of them. You could see a little bit of Taj Gibson in a three-man center rotation. But at 3.2K, the price point for Diabate makes him in play. Like if you do get, Richards early foul trouble, that could benefit him. So I definitely don't think these guys are optimal plays, but I think they're interesting tournament plays. And then I think Taj Gibson could play a little bit, but I'm not going to consider him for DFS.
What do you want to do with someone like either Josh Green or Cody Martin? Green is, one of, if not the worst permanent fantasy players in the league. I actually haven't refreshed the table. Is he still near the bottom?
He was like bottom 10, I think last time you said, or something like that.
Right now he's climbing a little bit. He's 22nd. Gary Harris bringing up the rear now, which makes some sense. Hasn't been in for a bit. But we've got these guys, 4,800 for Josh Green, small forward, power forward eligible. Cody Martin's 5,200, just small forward. Martin's a much better per minute guy than Green. Like Martin's just your average NBA player when it comes to it. And these guys have their salaries where they normally are. But 3% own Green, 5% own Martin. It's a 3-game slate. I feel like those two guys are like sort of underrepresented for what's going on here. And they kind of work as interesting tournament pivots. It scares the hell out of me, especially Green, but there aren't a lot of ownership's relatively concentrated today. I feel like these guys make you a little bit different.
Yeah, I think they're definitely viable. Obviously, they're a little bit tougher to get to because of the price points, right? 5.2 for Martin and 4.8 for Josh Green, but that's also coming with basically no ownership. I think of these two wings, I think I'd slightly prefer Martin. I think the ceiling's a little bit higher on him than Josh Green, but these are guys you can definitely mix in, and they should play decent minutes here, assuming this game stays competitive. So I have no issue with those guys as contrarian options. Solana, I think it would be a little bit tougher to get to. We didn't mention him. Unless he starts, there's a chance he could start. We've seen him start games in the past, but I think I would only consider him at 4,500 if he picks up the start. And then I wanted to mention one more guy, Isaiah Wong. So 3 games ago when Micic was like really, really popular, he was a little bit of a letdown. He only played 25 minutes, kind of struggled. And they actually closed with, or they extended Isaiah Wong. He played 22 minutes. So 3.4K, if the game gets out of hand, probably be on the court in a blowout. So I didn't want to mention that because he's getting absolutely no ownership.
I like that. Definitely a guy, especially at 1% ownership, that's worth the flyer because he could just easily get like 24 minutes and they don't want to give Micic that much because they don't really see a ton of future in it.
Right.
It's going to end up being a Wong day, isn't it? Nobody wants that. That feels like the Wong answer.
Yeah, someone asked about KJ Simpson. I don't know if he'll see minutes unless the game's a blowout. So he was originally ahead of Wong, and then Wong kind of surpassed him over the last week or so.
Yeah, I projected KJ Simpson for 0 minutes, so I don't feel great about him. It would be my thought process. I also would not be clicking on Daquan Jeffries. God, this is just bleak. Yeah, we have to watch this for a half hour on playback tonight. I hope Milwaukee and Cleveland create some sort of news that people need so they can come in and hang out and wait on whatever updates we need from 7 to 7:30 because, okay, let's do this. But we obviously have some time.
Yep.
So we're about to talk about Philly. Looking at this roster now, how many guys would you roster? And this is not a DFS question. Like, how many basketball players would you take from Philly before you got to your first Hornet? Obviously, 3 right out of the gate are just Embiid, Maxey, Paul George, no comps for sure.
That are playing today, right? For the Hornets.
Yeah. Today's roster.
Brandon Miller out.
No. Yeah, today's rosters.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely the top 3. I'm
taking Oubre before anybody, I think.
Yeah, I would say it's close with like Bridges and Oubre. I think those two are relatively similar. So I think it would be around that, like the 4th guy or so.
Yeah. And then it might even be a couple more Sixers potentially, like depending on how you feel about ranking Yabusele, Drummond, Diabate, and Nick Richards. Like you could very easily put both Philly dudes before the 2 Charlotte dudes. Kenyon Martin Jr. is not all that dissimilar from, the no-name wings that are going on for Charlotte. It's just looking at it. It's so disgusting. This could be so much worse if Philly was a different team, because we might be able to get to like 7 or 8 on like Boston or Cleveland or something.
Oh yeah. This is like Boston. Yeah, it probably would be like 7 or 8 guys before.
It would be everybody we projected, probably.
I think so. Yeah.
Like the conversation would be like, would you rather have Miles Bridges or Sam Hauser?
That's literally what I was thinking. I'm like, that would be kind of close, I think.
Oh my gosh. All right, guys, schedule for the rest of the day. I could hit that quickly. It's very simple. We're going to go up until 6 p.m. NBA Live Before Lock is going to come in after us. They're going to take you all the way up until lock. And then Greg and I will be on playback for the first time since last Friday. We're going to be watching Charlotte Philly. We will be, I hope, turning that game over to Milwaukee and Cleveland the moment that they start playing basketball. Unfortunately, that'll probably be 7:45 at the rate NBA games go. But go to playback.tv/Stokastic. Watch the game along with us. If you have a League Pass account, you can just link up your account, watch the game. We're all watching the same stream. Chat is essentially live. There's no latency. It's immediate. Everything's immediate. It's so much fun. We'll be breaking down the ownership that actually came in for games that lock, potential late swaps, bets, whatever we can think of. Probably some random conversations. Greg and I tend to do that from time to time. If you don't have League Pass, we do have 20 VIP passes that we could hand out. If you get that VIP pass, that also will let you watch the game along with us. But just get League Pass. It's awesome. The Sixers are finally going to have potentially all 3 of their dudes in. We are still waiting on the news for Joel Embiid, questionable with the right sinus fracture, coming back with the Batman mask, I hope. Caleb Martin out. Obviously, Jared McCain out. Not a ton of ownership coming into this Sixers team right now. That might look a little bit different if we happen to lose Embiid, because he is the most owned guy on DraftKings. 35% ownership for Embiid on DK. He's 9,500. He's actually $900 more expensive on FanDuel, a lot less owned. But 8% to Maxey, 12 to Paul George, 4 to Kelly Oubre. Those guys are all around 20 on the FanDuel side. Let's just start with Embiid. If he's in, how do you feel? Because that 36% ownership looks really good to me.
Yeah, no, I think assuming he's in and no limitations, I don't think there will be. I think he stands out as a pretty good option here. I lean right now that he is going to play. And I think he is going to wear the mask, by the way. Got news yesterday that he participated in the 5-on-5 practice. So that kind of leads me to believe that he's going to play. And yeah, it's a great spot here against the Hornets. Like he should be able to feast for whenever he's out there against Richards or Diabate or Taj Gibson, whoever they try to throw on him. So yeah, I think Joel Embiid looks like a really good point per dollar play. Definitely one of the better centers on this slate. So yeah, he looks really good. The rest of Philly, I think, is a little bit tougher to get to, assuming Embiid plays. Like Maxey and George are not out of play, 9K for Maxey and 8.5K for Paul George, but they're just guys that you can mix in as contrarian options. Like Maxey, I think the assist numbers will go up a bit, kind of just running the pick and roll with Embiid. But yeah, this slate, for at least for Philly, for me, comes down to Embiid. Because if Embiid plays, there's not a ton I love. If Embiid misses, though, that just completely changes everything.
So I like We just did a new ownership run, by the way.
Okay.
Micic up to 80 on DraftKings. Bridges 60, Curry 60, Diabate and Cody Martin both are around like 12 to 14.
Okay.
So slightly different perspective there. Curry down to where I think it should be. I do think Micic should be ahead of Curry in that ownership. Yep. So like that order of operations looks right to me. Embiid still at 35, Maxey 10, George 6, Oubre 4. I like all three of those guys a lot more than the ownership. I think they are quite a bit underrepresented. Not that I think that they're priorities for today, but just looking at it through the lens of my data right now, I have their total boom scores, which I try to scale to 3-game slates, close to 100% total, which is essentially saying you'd expect one of those guys to hit their target score for today. And you're getting 10% ownership on Maxey, 6 on Paul George, and 4 on Kelly Oubre. I have those guys that I think they should all be like 15% owned, the way that I'm looking at the slate today. And it's not that I think any one of them looks better than the other. I think they're basically equals relative to salary for their positions. But they're guys that I want to be a little bit over on, because I think you can grab, say, Embiid and Oubre, and that's probably a pretty unique combination if we're going to have Kelly Oubre projected for 4% ownership. I only have him needing like a little over 30 fantasy points to be useful. You get to 35 and you can, like, he's just going to be in winning lineups if he pulls enough ownership. I'm sneakily interested in those 3 guys for Philly today at relatively low ownership.
Yeah, I like that call. And a positive, honestly, is like the minutes have been amazing. Like recently, Maxey, Paul George, Oubre, they all played 40 minutes last game. So they're playing like high 30s minutes pretty consistently here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, those guys, again, I think are good tournament plays. I like the shot out there. And yeah, probably going a little bit underrepresented.
One other guy that I want to touch on here, I don't have any confidence, but we are going to talk about a billion 3K guys on this slate. When I say 3K, I mean, 3 to 3,900. Eric Gordon played 26 minutes the first game without Jared McCain. He actually closed the game, which was not something anybody would have expected. Now, I did not give him 26 minutes. I don't have a great feel for how many minutes this dude is going to play today. He's shooting guard, small forward eligible. He's a dreadful per minute guy. He is in a battle with Josh Green. I mean, I actually have him worse than Josh Green, if you really want to know how bad it gets. But 0 ownership. What happens if 26 minutes is just like their goal now moving forward, or even 22, 24? That puts him up against some of these idiots from Charlotte, the 100 3K guys that exist on Milwaukee, but he's doing it with no ownership. It's not fun. He probably fails a lot, but I have my eye on it a little bit if they're dusting him off.
Oh, that's so gross, Eric Gordon, but I get it. I get it because he's getting no ownership. Yeah, like you could see a little extra run for Lowry too. That's possible. I don't know. I just have no confidence in it at all. But he is shooting guard, small forward eligible, so he's a little bit easier to get to. And yeah, like you said, he closed last game. Don't think that's going to happen every single night, but
no.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys in that 3K range that are getting ownership, and he's getting none. So if you wanted to mix in a little bit, I totally get it.
It's not that I don't enjoy everything that I just said. I want to be very clear here. I don't want people to read into this more than they do. Just, he's a guy that I have projected for enough minutes that it wouldn't be crazy if he ended up in a winning lineup. But he's pretty well cooked.
Yeah, I would say he's pretty dust at this point in his career for sure.
I guess we should just hypothetically touch on the off chance that Embiid doesn't play. Yep. Andre Drummond is 6K. Yabusele is 5K, power forward center. Do you think either one of those guys are going to be popping?
I think Drummond will look pretty good in that scenario. He started last game that Embiid missed. He played 28 minutes. Yeah, so I think Drummond would not be a priority, but would definitely stand out as a pretty good play there in the mid-range. Yabusele in their most recent game that Embiid missed, strictly just played the backup 5 and they put 18 minutes. So he would be a little bit tougher to get to. Earlier in the season when Embiid was out, we would see like Drummond, Yabusele start together. and then Yabusele would play the backup 5. So unless like he would start 2, I think it would be tougher to get to him. But yeah, Drummond I think would be a solid option, assuming he starts. I'm pretty sure he would.
Well, there we go. We got rid of Charlotte. We're finished with Philly. Now we could talk about a game that could have been a really awesome game had Damian Lillard not been ruled out. Now it's just still solid. But Milwaukee's a 9-point dog in Cleveland today, 220 total. And as I just mentioned, no Damian Lillard for this one. Giannis is probable. Everybody else that's normally available is Middleton back in for this one. We're getting a little bit of ownership coming into Giannis right now. It's 75 on DraftKings, 68 on FanDuel. Bobby Portis is 25% owned. Chris Middleton is 25% owned. Lopez, AJ Green, Gary Trent, Andre Jackson, they're all at 10. And the guy that I think we're all assuming starts at the point tonight, DeLon Wright, flat min 3K point guard, 18% owned. Let's just start with Giannis. I don't have a negative thing to say about that ownership. It makes total sense. We have 15 different 3K guys you could roster. There's no stopping you from rostering. You could play Giannis and Shea today and really have enough salary with enough of these guys that you'll be able to build the lineup. Are you surprised to see the ownership? Does it bother you at all? It makes sense to me.
Nope. Yeah, this is kind of setting up as a stars and scrub slate anyway, but 11-3 for Giannis looks amazing. Again, he's getting a ton of ownership, but he should be. With Dame off the court this year, he's got a 44% assist percentage and 1.75 fantasy point per minute player. That's over 300 minute sample size. So not a ton of downside to say about Giannis. Again, he looks great. Definitely a top spot up to get to for sure. The rest of Milwaukee, so I think the starting lineup could go a lot of different ways. Again, I think the assumption right now is DeLon Wright is going to start, but I would not be surprised if they start Giannis at the point and like shift like Gary Trent Jr. or AJ Green into the starting lineup. Mm-hmm. So definitely keep an eye on what Milwaukee does there with the starting lineup. If DeLon Wright does start, he is the flat min, and like I would prefer honestly DeLon Wright to Seth Curry, assuming both start. I would like DeLon Wright a good amount if he starts, but I think I would only play him if he starts. If he doesn't start, I think he could see rotation minutes, but I don't think it would be worth it. So that's why I said that the starting lineup is very important there. And then the other two like good players from Milwaukee, Bobby Portis and Chris Middleton coming in around 20%. This is a matchup against Cleveland with two bigs that, maybe Portis could play a little bit more. So like the ceiling on him a good amount. He didn't play a ton in the most recent game against Oklahoma City, but we kind of expected that. Right. They would just target him on the defensive end. And then Middleton getting around 20%. The minutes is really the issue, right? There's no real minute ceiling for him right now. I think he's going to play that low 20s, maybe high end 25. But a fair price point there, 5.3K. So understand why he's getting some love. And then, as you mentioned, kind of like that next tier of Bucks value, like Jackson and Green and Trent and Prince, they're all in like the 5 to 10% ownership range. Nothing I feel great about here. I think the preferred option there for me probably would be Gary Trent, just because, again, I think he does have the highest ceiling of that group. And then Brolo also not getting much love. Did have a decent game last game, but he's just more of a contrarian option for me too.
You mentioned the comparison between DeLon Wright and Curry. I have them graded out as essentially the exact same play, like basically the same optimal rate, same boom. They're the same price. They just happen to be slightly different positions, one point guard, one shooting guard. To see the difference in ownership between the two is stark and just makes me want to get now, because it's a 3-game slate. Like there are considerations of where value is, what is going on at shooting guard. So I don't want to just say like you should be able to compare them 1-to-1, but they're not all that dissimilar. If DeLon Wright is starting, I would like to have a little bit more of DeLon Wright in lieu of Curry. But when you talk about those extra dudes, AJ Green, Gary Trent, Andre Jackson, Taurean Prince, one of those guys is probably going to be decent. They all feel like the exact same play to me, and it's hard to sift through. But those guys are the reason that we can get to 75% Giannis, because this is, the Bucks have what? 1, 2, 3, 4. They have 5 legitimate 3K plays today.
Yep.
That's going to open up some stuff. And obviously we talked about Charlotte value, like that clearly exists.
We'll talk about the Thunder in a bit too. They have a lot of 3K guys.
It's a never-ending supply today. It really is. But yeah, I don't know how you dodge Giannis. He looks absolutely fantastic. I mean, he would have looked great even if Dame were in, but the moment you take Dame off the floor, yeah, he ends up in 75% of lineups. He doesn't. I mean, he doesn't need all that much. Like, I mean, if he's the highest scorer on the slate today at 57 fantasy points, like that's enough.
Definitely be enough.
Yeah, that could be enough. As long as Shea doesn't go for 75 in that scenario, and even then, you still might be able to pull it off.
Right. Do you think against like the two big lineup that maybe like Portis would be a little bit more likely to play, extended minutes in a game like this, or what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, it definitely affords them the ability to do it more. Like Evan Mobley's obviously getting a bit better offensively. We know where his skill set lies. Jared Allen is good, but like not exactly someone you're worried about offensively. So I think you could conceivably see a couple extra minutes for Portis to match with the size. I don't think that his defensive shortcomings would hurt them as bad in this matchup against Cleveland. Like, I like Cleveland. Their offense is good, but I don't think it would hurt them as bad to have Portis out there as it would in some other situations. So if they want to try to match with size, they don't have many other options. They basically have three guys that are big, and that's it. Sorry, Chris Middleton, I guess. But yeah, like if he played 27 minutes today, that wouldn't shock me in any way.
Okay.
I mean, I have him as the second best play on Milwaukee right now behind Giannis. So I'm fully on board with getting to a bit of Bobby Portis.
Yeah, reasonable price point. It's got the power forward eligibility. So, yeah, I would say like he's probably my second favorite play on Milwaukee too.
Oh, DK, you might know the answer to this. And if you don't, chat. Was Scotty Barnes in the winning lineup on FanDuel yesterday in the main contest?
I would say he probably did because I was tilted because I played him on DraftKings and he had a floor game. I think he finished with like 33 fancy points. So I feel like that would definitely make the winning FanDuel lineup.
And does anybody know how owned he was in the main FanDuel contest? I don't want anybody telling me like the quarter arcade or something.
I'm pretty sure. So I was like, I saw 70%. I'm like, wow, is that just 30% of the field basically like dead right away?
But yeah, it was 75. Wow, that's
75,
craziness. Yeah. And he was, in fact, in the winning lineup. Chad, I'll let you get there. You'll be in a couple seconds. 75, 75, 75, 76, 76.5, 84, 80 in the $10 single entry. That was not my question, Austin. I couldn't have laid that one out any better as a question, and yet still get answers that aren't that question. Incredible.
Yeah, so he had 32.25 on DraftKings, but it probably would have been a little bit higher because he had 2 blocks, 3 turnovers. So it probably was like around 35 fancy points on FanDuel.
Okay. Yeah, that was quite the miss. 25% of y'all aren't watching TV, aren't watching content. That's for sure. Okay, before we get to Cleveland, we got to talk about the Celebrate promo code. I led off the show with it incorrectly, sort of, but we got there eventually. We picked up another Millie winner this past week, and we always want to do a promo when it happens. And now is the perfect time to get in for the NFL. We don't have much left in the regular season. We're going to have tons of playoff slates. You guys know the showdowns for playoff stuff get really fun. It's not going to be stopping anytime soon. This deal runs through February 9th, Super Bowl Sunday. If you sign up using that promo code and you click that link in the description, it's $179 for everything we have on the NFL side, top to bottom, projections, ownership, our entire Sims package, our premium Discord. And that's $179. You get it till the end of it all. If you sign up tomorrow, it's $179. If you sign up on Sunday, it's $179. That's what the price is set at for you guys right now. But if you get in for today, that will be the cheapest that it is on a per day basis that it could possibly be. We've got weekend slates coming up. You've got Christmas Day football coming up. Football's not going anywhere anytime soon. Again, look at February 9th. It's December 20th. There's a full month in between that, and you can get everything we have for the NFL for $179. Hell of a deal, guys. Come on in. Maybe you could be the next Millie winner. Could be you. Then our promo is going to be about you. How fun would that be? Cavs, full strength and maybe extra special full strength. Max Strus, questionable for this one. Have not seen him yet this year. He has been out with a ankle sprain, which it's December. That's been taking a minute. And we're not really getting a ton of ownership here coming into Cleveland. In the 15 to 20 range on Mitchell, it's 20 for Darius Garland on DraftKings, 40 on FanDuel. Evan Mobley's about 30 on both sites. And then it's 10 to Jared Allen, a couple shares of LeVert, a couple shares of Dean Wade. Who do you like the most here from Cleveland?
I think Donovan Mitchell, looking at the ownership, he's coming in around 15%. 8.7K is a reasonable price point for him. I like the spot for him. I like his ceiling. Again, he's not getting a ton of love on a small slate. So we know like the ceiling that he has. Like he can go for 50 plus, 60 plus. He's done 60 plus like 3 times already this year. So I think you've also seen a lot of blowouts for Cleveland recently. I think in a competitive game against the Bucks, like you could see like 35, 36 minutes for Donovan Mitchell. So I'm looking at the ownership. I think right now he's like my preferred option of like the main guys. Evan Mobley getting the most love, 7.7K. Understand why he's getting close to 30% ownership. Garland coming in similar ownership to Mitchell. I think I'd slightly prefer Mitchell to Garland, but it's not by a super wide margin. Jared Allen is a little bit tougher to get to. I know he's not getting a ton of love, but he's only center eligible. There's, a few centers we already mentioned, like Embiid's a really good play. We'll talk about Hartenstein. I think he's a pretty good option. A few other guys as well. So Jared Allen, I think, is a little bit tougher to get to. But yeah, like Mitchell. And then the value options, keep an eye on the status of Max Strus. If Strus does not play, some of these value plays look a little bit better, like Dean Wade, I think would play a few extra minutes, maybe LeVert as well. If Strus is in, I think it's a little bit tougher to get to kind of like these fringe Cavs value plays.
Yeah, somebody that I was looking at Sam Merrill earlier this morning. If Strus happens to be out, it's just like another guy. Add him to that AJ Green, Gary Trent, Andre Jackson, Taurean Prince list of people, because then he'll just sort of look exactly like those guys do. Dean Wade too, in that scenario. I basically have Mitchell, Garland, and Mobley as like 3 exact same guys. It's interesting to see Mobley pull 26% ownership, Garland at 20, Mitchell at 15. Kind of just makes me want to get to a little bit more of Mitchell over the top of those guys. And I don't want to say a little bit less of Mobley, because that implies that I don't like him, and that's not what it is. But just because Mitchell's as low as he is, he has an MPE, so you do get that sort of flexibility as well. If you need to get to a shooting guard spot that's inundated with Seth Curry, maybe you could turn that into Donovan Mitchell and pay down at a different position. But yeah, I'm with you on Jared Allen. I don't obviously fine, playable, 10% ownership makes some sense. Not the sexiest play in the world. Doesn't necessarily feel like that kind of matchup for him either, but could be wrong. And like LeVert just sort of exists on this slate. It is a kind of a weird situation because of how extreme this slate has become. We have all of these like very obvious plays. We've got this chunk of dudes that like you just don't want to get to. And then in this range that would include Karis LeVert, basically like all these guys that are in the like 5 and 6K range are just like a giant melting pot of lineup filler, because it's so naturally a stars and scrubs day. So I look at someone like LeVert and it's like, yeah, he's fine. He should be like 10% owned, but he's behind 25 more dudes just because of the way this slate is set up.
Yeah, a lot of the mid-range guys look pretty similar. Like LeVert, like kind of looks pretty similar to like Middleton, the opposite side. So
yeah, man, I really wish Dame was healthy. This would have been a really fun game.
Agree.
OKC, fresh off their loss in the NBA Cup final, now on a back-to-back that is not a very desirable back-to-back. They are getting the worst of it for being qualified for the NBA Cup final. Their schedule sucks right now. But on that back-to-back, there's nothing really here to pay attention to from an injury perspective. Everybody that's normally in is in. There's no injury management or rest or any of that sort of stuff. And we're seeing some ownership here. I don't want to touch on any of this individual ownership before we cross this first one off. 20% ownership to Shea on DraftKings, 20 on FanDuel. How do you feel about this gap in ownership between Giannis and Shea? Now, very clearly, Giannis projects a lot better than Shea does, but 70 to 20, like does it just become a day where you want a little bit more Shea? I kind of like him a little bit more than his ownership shows.
Yeah, I think he's going a little bit underrepresented right now. Like I think like maybe like 35% would probably be correct. So I think he's going a little bit underowned. And like the price points come down a little bit too. Like 10.3K is a reasonable price point for him. He's playing 36 to 38 minutes consistently in competitive games. This game should be competitive. So yeah, I like the call there. I think Shea is a good, contrarian option. Good way to get different, especially with, we kind of know how the field's going to play it. Barry starts and Scrubsy, and we know Giannis is going to be an extremely popular play.
Yeah, that number just feels a little bit low for what we have here. Like the combination, like getting Shea plus Embiid just feels great, even in comparison to what is clearly going to be an overwhelmingly popular Embiid and Giannis combo. Now, the ownership doesn't stop with Shea. Jalen Williams, Isaiah Hartenstein, Aaron Wiggins are all in the 25 to 30 range. We're going to dig into Aaron Wiggins in a sec. Dort and Wallace and Caruso and Joe are all grabbing a little bit of ownership. And for those that care, Jalen Williams, 50% owned on the FanDuel side. I don't have much to say about Williams, Hartenstein, and Dort. I think everybody kind of knows how to project these guys at this point. It's the same starting lineup all the time. They don't really do anything weird with those four guys. We know how talented they are. We know what they are. I do think they should, that Jalen Williams should be around 25% owned. I do think Hartenstein should be around 25% owned. I actually think Lou Dort's probably a hair under owned for what we have here, but it's just so much easier to pay lower than him today. So I think that's why he's getting squeezed a bit. But do you have any hot takes on Williams, Hartenstein, and Dort?
No, I wouldn't say any hot takes. I think like Hartenstein is one of my favorite center plays. He's getting ownership though. So yeah, those guys both are like all around 20%. Makes sense. So yeah, no real like super strong takes other than I think they're good plays.
Yeah. Then we need to sift through the rest of this bench. 5% ownership to Cason Wallace, 8 to Alex Caruso, 7 to Isaiah Joe, 31 to Aaron Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins, in yesterday's game, played 31 minutes, the fourth most minutes of anybody on the Thunder. Now, he definitely grabbed a couple extra from Lou Dort. Dort was in some foul trouble, but Dort still played 26. It's not like he played 16. What is your expectation for minutes today for Aaron Wiggins? Because he played 6, 10, and 9 in the 3 games before that. He played 6 more minutes yesterday than he did in the 3 games before that. What do we do here?
Yeah, I think he's going way over owned right now, honestly. Like if he didn't play 31 minutes last game, he would probably be unowned today. Again, I just don't have a ton of confidence in the minutes right now. And if you're going to get Aaron Wiggins being over 30% owned, like I would just much rather take my shots on the other Thunder value that are not getting ownership. Like give me 5% Isaiah Joe over 30% Aaron Wiggins, or like I'd rather take a shot on Caruso, who's not getting much love either. Cason Wallace at 4.4K, basically getting no ownership. He moved back into the starting lineup last game. Now the minutes weren't amazing last game, but we have seen Cason Wallace in starts play 30 plus minutes. So yeah, like it's hard to feel confident in what Dagnall's going to do on a nightly basis with some of these kind of secondary guys. And if the field's going to gravitate towards one because he played 30 minutes last game, like that's just probably something I would rather get away from. So I think he's going over owned. I think I'd just rather take shots in some of these other Thunder Valley plays that are not getting much ownership.
Yeah, I'm with you that he feels a little overowned. I got him to 17% optimal in my projections. I got him with about a 20% chance of going for 21 fantasy points. Feels like he should probably be like 20 to 25. And that wouldn't surprise me all that much. It also wouldn't surprise me at all if he just plays 10 minutes again and everybody loses their minds over it. This one feels like the most downside. Like of all the value plays that we've talked about so far, whether it's the Charlotte guys or the Milwaukee guys, like I expect all the Milwaukee guys to play in and around the minutes that we've projected at this point, because that's just what they do. They're always playing those minutes. For the Charlotte guys, they just don't really have too many alternatives to those guys playing a decent chunk of minutes. OKC has those alternatives. Cason Wallace can get his 30 minutes a game back. They can start to ramp up Alex Caruso at some point. I don't necessarily think it's today, but it could be. And then Isaiah Joe. I mean, he started in the NBA Cup final. What if the shot's just falling for Isaiah Joe? He could fall into more minutes. AJ Mitchell's right there playing quite a bit less than he had been, say, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Maybe he just gets some of his minutes back. Aaron Wiggins is scary, but I don't hate having him. I do think he's the first non-starter to get to, but don't be surprised at all if he's back to an old rotation.
Yeah. And also, again, I'm glad you mentioned it. Like, he did get extended a little bit last game because Dort was in some foul trouble. So,
yeah,
like, I would be pretty surprised if he plays 30 minutes again tonight.
Oh, yeah, me too. I think, like, if you got 24 out of him today, I think you would take that as, like, a win.
Happy, for sure.
I mean, if he gets to 20, honestly, that's a victory for where he's been recently. This is a crazy one, man. It's so weird. So weird. I was curious, like, when I woke up today and as the day went on, like, what was going to happen with him. And he's the highest owned guy on the Thunder right now. Now, if I'm honest, I don't think that'd be the case by the time we get to lock and everything's in. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up being like 21 and, you know, Jalen Williams and Hartenstein and Shea are all in like that 25 range. It wouldn't shock me. He would then be like essentially properly owned, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he doesn't get to 30, especially being in the late game too.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
That's one interesting piece. You could definitely like, you can't really like move him around on his own team if you have him. Like if you're confident in Wiggins, but it's 731, you can't, like, Joe's 34, Kenrich is 32. So you're kind of like trapped by his salary too.
Yeah, you could do like a 2v2 pivot or something in the late game. Like, if you're the first 2 games start, you're not looking good. Like, all right, I'm gonna get off Aaron Wiggins and get on to like one of the lower owned options and try to give yourself a chance to cash. So, yeah, definitely would recommend. Obviously, people don't do it enough, but late swap for sure. So yeah.
I got another promo for everybody before we keep it moving and finish off this Miami Heat team, and that promo is Gift EV. GIFT EV. Link should be in the description. You can get 50% off a month of an OddsShopper subscription. So if you're into sports betting, if you're into pick'em sites, this is the tool you're looking for. The easiest way I could describe what you should be doing with OddsShopper is simply go to Greg Ehrenberg's Twitter right now and find his bankroll challenge. He puts out these bets every single day. He started at the beginning of the NBA season. He's absolutely crushing this bankroll challenge, and he started with $100. It's upwards of 600 now, I believe, at least certainly well north of 500. That will explain everything you want to know. We take a market-based approach to beating the books. We've got all the data that you could possibly want. Recommendations are popping up every single second. You can get notifications straight to your phone. You're one button click away from placing those bets. You could see 20 bets on your screen and click a mass entry button and immediately have your entire card populated on whichever sports book you're looking for. If you want to get in for the holiday season, you want to start tailing some of the plays that Greg is doing or everybody else that's working with the OddsShopper and Portfolio EV tools, this is the way to do it. Get it for half off right now. Gift EV. This one expires the day after Christmas. So ho, 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 everybody.
That's one of my favorite things to check every morning is Greg's Twitter thread. He's up to I think like 7. He's like 7x his money already, right?
Yeah. I want to say it's just north of 600 now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Day 48. Yeah, he's at 684. He's made $584 on 48 betting days of the NBA, starting with a $100 bankroll. I don't know what, like, if that doesn't make you want to get this, I don't know what in the world you would need for convincing.
For sure.
It speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. You don't need a lot of money to start with it. Greg is proving that with $100. He's already turned it into almost $700. It's fascinating. So shout out to Greg. Shout out to OddsShopper and the Portfolio EV tool. Let's be very clear here. Greg is just the front man. Miami Heat. Kind of confusing if we're talking about bench guys. Nikola Jovic, questionable. Pelle Larsson, questionable. Larsson had been playing decent enough minutes prior to getting injured. But when Larsson and Jovic went down, Drew Smith rose up. Now I don't know what we're doing with any of those guys, but the good news is if they're all in, it doesn't appear that anybody's getting rostered. 25% ownership to Tyler Hero, around 25 for Bam Adebayo, around 15 for Jimmy Butler, single digits for everybody else across both sites. Hero and Bam were both over 40 when I did the strategy show. I didn't think that was going to hold up. I said I thought it would come down. This is where I expected it to be. I do think Hero and Bam are both properly owned, but I feel like Jimmy Butler's a little sneaky today if he's only 14% owned. What say you?
Yeah, I think all three of these main Heat guys are firmly in play. I think my preferred option probably would be an $8,100 Bam. The minutes have been very solid on him, even in competitive games, or in competitive games, I should say. So yeah, Bam looks really, really good. Jimmy's getting the least ownership of the main three guys. Reasonable price point though, so I think a fair contrarian option for sure. And then Tyler Hero at 7.4K, point guard only, but also playing good minutes in competitive games. So I think all three of those guys look pretty good. I don't really have any super strong takes, I guess, on those three. The value play is a little bit tougher to get to because it's always really hard to figure out what the Heat are going to do with that bench rotation. But yeah, of like the main three guys, which one is your favorite right now for Miami?
I mean, I have Hero grading out the best.
Okay.
Just by a little bit. But I have him 29% optimal and I have Butler 25. So like relative to ownership, it's Butler for me. And to me, that's pretty clear. Like if I look at our projections, we have Butler at 36 fantasy points. We have Hero at 38. I have that a little bit tighter. And I think that's probably what's causing me to like him a little bit more. But the idea of having him at 14% ownership today, given what we know, given the massive ownership coming into Giannis, the relatively light ownership to Shea, like I'm not saying that I want to advocate for not having Giannis, but like if you can get Shea and Butler and something else as a pay up, like that's an interesting top end that you could unlock. And maybe you don't even need as much of the crazy value, or maybe you just do that with Giannis and Jimmy Butler and call it a day because he looks so damn good. But I don't know. He feels a little slept on to me if he really is 14% owned.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree there. The value again, as we talked about, like they're not getting much love. I think a $4,600 Rozier is a reasonable option. 28, 25, 34 minutes in overtime last game. So the minutes have been ticking up a little bit for him. So I think he's like a fair contrarian option right now, getting sub 10% ownership. The rest of the team, I mean, Duncan Robinson's getting not a lot of ownership. I think he's fine tournament play. If he's making his shots, he can get extended. Like we've seen games where Duncan Robinson has, pushed for 30 plus minutes, like 28 there against Cleveland, 29 against Phoenix. So, if he's playing well and making his shots, like he could definitely get extended a bit. Jaime Jaquez, I'm surprised he hasn't been playing more for this team. He's 3,900, sub 20 minutes in each of the last 5 games. The one game that he played a lot, he played really well. I think that was a game that Jimmy missed and he played 36 minutes. So I'm a little bit surprised that he hasn't been playing more. They've been going to a lot of Drew Smith, which surprises me, but he's averaging like 30 minutes a game over the last 4 games. The downside with him is he's just really not a good point per minute player. And when you kind of need the minutes to be there for him, and I think they could just go other directions if he's not playing well, that scares me. He's not getting much love, but I agree. I don't think he should be. Are there any of the value plays that you like for Miami?
It all depends on if Larson and Jovic end up playing. Like if they're both available, then I don't know how you do it because we don't know who's going to be in and who's going to be out. If they're both out again, then I'd be willing to take some shots on Drew Smith because he seems to just be soaking up all of that playing time right now. It's not going to be fun, but he doesn't look all that dissimilar than some of the other guys. You're paying a little bit more to probably be a bit more contrarian with him, but I would need to see those guys be out to have any confidence. Honestly, I'd probably be more likely to get to Kevin Love than anybody else, and he might only play 13 minutes. But he could get 22 fantasy points in 13 minutes in that kind of scenario. Maybe not against OKC, but he could definitely do it. But yeah, we need that news, and likely scenario there is we don't get it until 7:30, so it probably wouldn't matter all that much. Max Strus available to make his season debut today. Welcome back, Strus. That's a big ad for them, man. That shooting helps.
He's a good player for them.
Real rotation piece, can play enough defense that it doesn't totally kill them when he's out there, and obviously can shoot the shit out of the ball. This slate, man. This slate. Oh. All right. Is there anything we haven't touched on? Anything that you were thinking about today before we got started? Anything we're missing here?
Let's see. I mean, we kind of talked about how like this slate is going to be this slate's going to be pretty stars and scrubs, right? Just with all that like value on that we have in the slate. So if there's someone that you like really like in the mid range, like I would say go for it, because a lot of like the guys in the mid range are not getting a ton of ownership. So if there's anyone in that like 5 to 7K range you guys like really like yeah, I would go fire them up, because like we know most of the field is going to go very stars and scrubs. If you go like maybe just 1 star and a little bit more balance, like that's gonna make your lineup pretty unique.
Travis Scott says, just play Ty Jerome. Thank me later. He is literally unplayable.
Yep, especially with Strusen now too.
Yeah, that on full stop unplayable. You better pray that game goes to shit and he plays the entire fourth quarter.
How many minutes do you think? How many minutes do you think Strus will play? You think like probably around 20 is my guess.
18, 20, upwards of 20. I mean, it's an ankle, so like I can't imagine he's in peak game shape. They have no real reason to rush him back. Everybody's healthy today, so like I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 16, honestly. Mm-hmm. More than 20 would shock me, but it wouldn't be like weird. It was just, we don't know his medicals. We don't know how much he's been working. So like he could just be better off. I don't know that, but I would assume if it's taken him this long to get into the season, they're probably not going to start stretching him out for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll be pretty conservative. Someone said in the chat that the Charlotte Valley pieces will bust, which, yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. Charlotte could get blown out tonight. So like, if you think that happens, I would say, maybe look to one of those bench guys. Maybe look to like Isaiah Wong. That would probably get extended in a scenario like that. So yeah, that's definitely possible. Like a lot of like the Misic, Seth Curry, like if they just get blown out by like 30, like yeah, they don't have to be in the winning lineup.
I mean, something's going to be good from Charlotte just by default. Who that ends up being could be fully dependent on how bad this beating becomes.
Yeah. Like competitive game, you're probably getting decent minutes for like Misic and Curry and Bridges and Richards. In like a blowout scenario, what you're probably looking to like Wong and Diabate and guys like that. Salon too, but I don't think he's playable.
Yeah. No, same. Well, I think we've reached the end of the line here. NBA Live Before Lock is about to happen now. Guys, if you're here, hit that like button. You got one more hour of this one. Then you get Greg and I over on playback. I feel like if I just talk about the Live Before Lock crew, they're just going to like appear. I could just, all of a sudden they're just in the bill. Oh, there's one, there's two. What's up, boys?
Oh. Before you guys sign off, does Joel Embiid play or not? Best guess.
I think so.
Yeah, he lives for these matchups, man. When the team blows and he can go out there and look good.
That's what I think too. It's going to be the most classic return to action for Joel Embiid. Plays a garbage team tonight. Then they plays. Who do they play? Cleveland or something tomorrow? Yeah. And then he sits for that game. That's absolutely how this is going to go. He's done this so many times over the course 100%. Of the last year.
He should get booed in Philly.
Like
he should get booed if he plays tonight. That's just ridiculous. He's played 6 games this year and he's going to duck the Cavs. I mean, if you're just trying to tank, you're trying to tank. But you're 8-16. Joel Embiid is supposed to be one of the top 5-10 players in the NBA, and right now, he's just don't know. I can't even.
I mean, that's what he's done for years now. It's just the script is written. That's what I'm fairly confident it's going to be.
I'm in agreement there. Where does Joel Embiid eventually get traded to?
Phoenix. Retirement home. There's going to be a point where who's going to trade for him when he's played 6 games at this point this season? Like who wants to deal with this?
Charlotte. I mean, shitty teams.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe a shitty team. I don't even know if that would be the case, though, to be honest.
I don't know. There's a lot of dumb, shitty teams out there that would talk themselves into it. I don't know. One of those teams that like couldn't get a Joel Embiid unless they traded for him type spots. all of the non-free agent destinations. A straight swap for Zion. Who says no?
Oh my God.
Everybody. Everybody says yes. Everybody says no.
Lose.
All right, you boys have fun.
Neither play
Greg,
a game again.
Yeah.
I'll see you in an hour.
Yep. See you in an hour, Josh. So it's going to be Eric. It's going to be Eric and myself here for, see you guys. Are you in a playback, Eric?
No, I will be.
Hold on. I'm not done yet.
I got hot.
Into playback, Eric, while Josh figures out how to leave StreamYard.
Scott, I did not say that Nance was unplayable yesterday. That's absolutely incorrect.
Nance was extremely playable, and then you could have done the smart thing and shifted it all to Precious Achiuwa and got drilled because of it. So that would have been fun.
Did I say that I was nervous about it because they could have played Dominic Barlow and Nance was a backup center? Yeah. But at no point in time did I say that he was unplayable. That's a preposterous statement. Get the crap out of your ears. See you guys at 7.
All right. Josh, and as has been pointed out in chat by Jake, Josh and his communist China hat are about to head on out of here, and we'll see Josh back in playback in a little bit here. So, by the way, just proof, Eric, that you're not the only one I make fun of. You're just the one I'm on camera with the most. So, for today, obviously the big piece of news that we have Joel Embiid questionable to play, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen. That's just my best guess. I've got all my lineups set and built. They're all under the assumption that Joel Embiid is going to be playing. If he's out, then everything changes, and then we basically do a whole nother show in like 30 minutes.
Yep, sounds good. Is it me that's a little bit laggy, or is that you? What's going on?
I don't see anything laggy through StreamYard chat. Do you guys see anything laggy? Everything seems fine on my end.
Oh, it seems really bad on my end.
I guess we won't know for a second here, but Jake DeWitt says you guys are both clear on my end. So
good.
I don't know.
It just kept chopping up when we were chopping it up, the four of us, and I was like trying to talk, and it kept cutting out. It must be on my end.
Yeah, all good. Chat says that they're not seeing any issues on their end. Right. So we get in to start talking about it. And as per usual, if you guys have any questions for us and you're a Stokastic sub, leave it in the Discord channel. I'm going to be on the hunt for those, be looking out for them. If you got a super chat for us, I'll be looking out for super chats in the YouTube here. And if you guys could be so kind, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. In general, Eric, how do you feel about this slate? I know that it's the NBA severely seems to have screwed up this NBA Cup schedule to where it's all the teams play, none of the teams play, all the teams play, none of the teams play. But for today's 3-game slate, anything in particular that is catching your eye that either has you turned off or turned on about the night?
Joel Embiid exists, and I gotta say, I'll just repeat it. If he plays tonight, I'm going to lose my mind. I don't get it. I really don't. Like, unless you are just being forced to by the NBA or by the Philly front office or by you have a girl in the crowd that you want to show out for. Like, I just don't get why Joel Embiid would play today and not play tomorrow. Like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I'm kind of on the opposite side of what I just heard DK and Josh say there when we were switching over. It would be absurd. It would just be absurd to my understanding. But from a DFS perspective, I can't do anything about it right now. I've got it as though it's straight up, and we're still waiting on that news. I've got it on X where I'm just kind of pulling up Joel Embiid, trying to see him warming up or see something of him out on the floor with that mask on, because he still has a broken nose. He has an illness designation also on the NBA injury report. If you pull up the actual NBA injury report, there's an illness designation. So there's a lot that could happen in the next 55 minutes that could change things drastically. But I'm with you. I've built things out, and I feel pretty good about, just from a DFS perspective, rolling with what I got. I
mean, the funniest thing that could possibly happen is he just gets ruled out with like knee soreness in a little bit here. That's also within the realm of possibilities for Joel Embiid. Giannis, he will end up playing today. If we look at overall what we're seeing on the injury report as of right now, and usually a lot of these players don't matter, but because it's a 3-game slate, it matters a little bit more than it normally would. So we know about Joel Embiid being questionable. He would always matter. But we also got Pelle Larsson as well as Nikola Jovic listed as questionable for the Heat. Since it's only a 3-game slate, is that something that matters to you at all, Eric? Larsson and Jovic being questionable?
It could. It also could not. I mean, obviously, Embiid being in would change a lot as far as like the way I look at the slate. If he's out, then probably not. You just would get so much more value. You're replacing like 39.5 PRA in the market That's a big number to be replacing and distributing throughout the rest of your lineup. Obviously, you wouldn't get the full 39.5, probably comes down a little bit, but I look at a number of these pieces as right now, yeah, they're going to matter because you've only got 3 teams to basically delve from. And I think there's some volatility in just about everything that isn't Micic. Like Micic could still have one of those terrible turnover 19-minute games and end up optimal at 4K. Like there's a lot of ways that Micic is still going to be good chalk no matter what occurs. Seth Curry, though, talked about it yesterday, kind of like poo-pooed it, and he goes out and puts up a pretty decent outing. You didn't need it, thank God. Or, 24.5 at flat 3K looks good until it doesn't. And it didn't after Larry Nance and Spencer Dinwiddie went berserk. But I think the main thing to be looking at on the Heat side is just kind of like, all right, if those guys end up out, can we get more minutes to some of these mid-range pieces? Like, can we get more minutes to Tyler Hero? Can we get more minutes to Jimmy Butler? I think that's kind of where it matters a little bit more rather than like, I'm looking to play some of that value.
Yeah, and as far as Larson and Jovic for me, maybe Jaime Jaquez would be somebody who I would potentially take a shot or two on if those guys are both out. It's not something that all of a sudden would make Jaquez like a smash value player or anything like that, but all of a sudden you open up the possibility of could you get 20-plus minutes for Jaquez, who's not a terrible fantasy producer, considering they're playing the Oklahoma City Thunder. I know that's a game that only has a 1-point spread, but I do think that OKC is live to blow out anybody at any given time, and Jaquez does typically play garbage time. So if Larson and Jovic are both out, Jaquez is somebody who could go from 0% of my lineups to like 5% or something like that. But not anything that would massively change my lineups to be overhauled in any kind of real way. So since we're expecting this to not be the normal slate where you and I are just reacting to news constantly, I think that what we could do instead is just kind of break down the slate like normal people and just look at the highest projected owned players, what we make of them. And of course, a lot of that is going to begin with the Charlotte Hornets and then people paying up for Giannis and Antetokounmpo. So let's start with the Charlotte value options and the Charlotte options here that are just pulling a lot of ownership. You got Micic at, by the way, Jacob, if you could, or maybe I'm looking at old, no, there's a new ownership update. If you refresh that, Jacob. Yeah, if you refresh that, you'll see one bright, like this is from, brand new, 36 seconds ago. And then look at the Charlotte Hornets here. And we've got Micic, the most popular play on the slate, pulling about 80% ownership. Don't worry, we'll look at FanDuel too, guys. But just starting with DraftKings, we got Micic, 80% owned. We got Miles Bridges, 60% owned. We got Seth Curry, 58% owned. And that right there is 3 of your 4 most popular players on the slate. The other player from the other players from the Charlotte Hornets are pulling some ownership as well. You got Nick Richards, 22.5% owned. You got Diabate, 15% owned. Cody Martin, 12.6. And then a really quick, Jake, if you wouldn't mind, let's flip this over to FanDuel and we'll look at the FanDuel ownership for the Charlotte Hornets. And you guys will see a lot of the same sort of value options. Micic, 86% owned on FanDuel. Bridges, 52%. We've got Seth Curry, 47.6%. Martin, just under 40%. Nobody else quite as popular as those guys over for FanDuel. Who's your favorite chalk option from the Hornets for this slate, Eric?
Micic, not close. He's 4K. We're assuming a much larger workload. You're missing ball handlers in Brandon Miller and in LaMelo Ball. Has he failed at certain tags? Sure. Has he failed in spots where he was mega chalk? Sure. But with Trey Mann also on the sideline and with only playing 16 minutes yesterday on the back-to-back, I feel pretty confident in his minutes. I feel pretty confident that it's hard at his assist rate to really completely fail you. I mean, there's a decent floor there, even with poor shooting. I mean, he hasn't shot the ball well whatsoever the entire year. Do you know his field goal percentage off the top of your head?
I'm sure it's very low.
Just guess a number from 2 and 3, like just, not the 3-point. I just want you to guess his 2-point percentage. Like, general,
so not his field goal percentage, just his 2-point percentage.
Or just overall field goal percentage, which is actually lower than his 3-point percentage, which is hilarious.
All right, 34%.
That's the exact number, you cheater. 34.1%.
All right, yeah, I didn't cheat. I just knew it was really low. I'd seen it a couple days ago,
Not
so
bad.
I probably wasn't
35.3% from 3. So I mean, I just basically modeled this out night before, and I can't have him that low. It's kind of like what happens with DeJounte Murray every single time. It's like, oh, you should play his points prop every single day because it's sub 20 and his usage is out of control, but his true shooting effective field goal percentage are just dog doo-doo. So Micic, no matter what, somebody that I just can't live without on this slate, making more than like If I were making one lineup, he'd be in it. If I were making 10 lineups, he'd be in at least 7 of them. That's kind of the way that I look at this slate.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think Micic at 4K, it's really funny because Micic actually, and by the way, just from a fantasy standpoint, real life, he's been not good this year. From a fantasy standpoint, he's actually been really good this year, other than the times he's been chalk. Every other time, he's had really good games, and then he just kind of dudded as chalk. So it's really funny because I think that people have this interpretation of him that he's just always been terrible for fantasy this year. But it's really not the case if you look at his game log from the times that he started. You've got him. All right. So the first game he was chalk, if I'm not mistaken, was the game against the New York Knicks, I think, where he scored 23 fantasy points. And then you had the game after that, he scores 36 fantasy points and people don't roster him. People get back on him against the 76ers. He scores 10 fantasy points. Then he scores 34, 30. 38 fantasy points. There's another spot where we go, oh my God, everybody has to play Micic. And then all of a sudden the Hornets go with a shortened rotation. He only plays 25 minutes. He scores 21 fantasy points. So you've got these 2 slates where he's been really popular, and they've been his 2 worst games as a starter overall. So as far as Micic goes, you could go back to last year when he was a starter and he was priced, last year when he was starting, he was pretty regularly priced in like the mid to high 5K as like low 6K range as well. So this price point on him is just not correct. It's just a matter of, will he not just be a total goofball the one time that he's chalk? Because that's kind of been the case so far. Only bad games he's had this year is when he's been chalk.
Yep. I don't think anybody looks at him as like a poor fantasy producer either. Like, I don't think that's the narrative around him. It's just a guy that has a lot of opportunity that's opened up by way of 2 guys who generally handle the ball that are both out, like guys who would exclusively be handling the ball. Josh Richardson out. All right. Yeah. We got that in. We're just waiting on the actual news. Jovic is available to play. I guess there's one piece of actual news. Pelle Larsson available to play as well. So no changes necessary to anything here on our end. I guess the question everybody's asking in what are you doing with Seth Curry? And I think that that's kind of the more interesting one because Micic, he didn't play a lot yesterday. Seth Curry played 32 minutes. He's not exactly young at this point in time in his career. He's been around quite a bit. I don't know what this means, but Charlotte has no reason to let him just play unlimited minutes if need be. I think you probably get a starting lineup of Micic, Green, Curry, Bridges, Richards. There's not a ton of guard depth behind him. There's Cody Martin, and that's basically it. We have Nick Smith and KJ Simpson both in the G League. I think we had a super chat come in. Is KJ Simpson with the G League? It would appear so. I'll double check.
100%.
Well.
He's listed as out on the injury report.
Okay.
He's in the G League. Also, he's on a 2-way contract, so they only have a limited amount of games that they could bring him up for. But yeah, he is out for tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at a very, very thin guard situation. And so Seth Curry, I think he's kind of just forced into some minutes at 3K. He's shooting dependent, and that's kind of the interesting part about it. Yesterday, a little bit of an outlier, which he had in his box score. He had a little bit of foul trouble, but he had 3 steals to go with it. He's like a 0.5 steals guy on the season. That's 12 and a half minutes, so adjust it, I suppose, to 30 minutes. You're looking at like 1 and change. But Seth Curry at 3K, I'm far more willing to get away from in one lineup than I am Micic.
And per your question about Seth Curry, he's my favorite 3K range player on the entire slate. Mm-hmm. I think that it's really hard to envision him not playing a good amount of minutes because if you go through Charlotte, like you said, they're really thin in the backcourt. You've got a total of here are all the guards they have. They've got Micic, they've got Seth Curry. Are we going to consider Josh Green a guard or a wing? Kind of more of a wing.
More of a wing, but I mean, he's basically starting at the 2, still in this iteration. I mean, him, Seth Curry at the 2, whatever you want to say.
Then you got Isaiah Wong, and you've got Daquan Jeffries. That's it. They've really got 4 guards. One of them is really more of a wing in Josh Green. So with that being said, they kind of have to play Seth Curry at least a reasonable amount of minutes. It doesn't mean he has to go out and play 40 or anything like that, but even if you're conservative with his minutes, I think you land somewhere around 30 with him. And that's going to make him a really, really strong value option. He played 32 minutes yesterday, and they were healthier yesterday than they were today. He didn't shoot the ball well yesterday either, and he still ended up coming away with a pretty decent fantasy game relative to his price point. He made, 28% of his threes yesterday, shot 2 of 7. But, he's not a terrible real-life basketball player. So he plays 32 minutes. He scores 24 fantasy points. Mm-hmm. If he scores 24 fantasy points again at his salary today, you're probably going to be pretty happy you played him.
Yeah, you are. And I will throw this out there. The one guy that I might end up playing, like, again, this is a huge might. Daquan Jeffries kind of makes sense as somebody that if you gave 32 minutes to Seth Curry, there's a world where Daquan Jeffries, he's projecting terrible for us. He's 3,100 though at power forward. And like, I'm not saying a 1-for-1 swap in certain situations. Like I think Isaiah Wong is going to be able to probably take on more minutes, but like Daquan Jeffries, considering he's power forward, 3,100, there are no rules to what Charlotte might end up doing. He's like a 6'5" guy, decent enough shooting numbers, very, very, very limited sample so far this season, but we've seen him all over the place in random spots. He was with the Knicks for a couple of years, only appeared in 17 games, almost all of that being blowout run. And with Tibbs, you know what blowout run looks like. It's the last minute and a half of a basketball game when you're up 30. So it's really hard to envision a world where I would want to get to tons of him, but he's at least on my radar because just looking at the minutes from yesterday, if this ends up being a blowout, which is, something that isn't unlikely, he could end up benefiting in like 10 minutes in the fourth quarter, 8 minutes in the fourth quarter, something like that. And at 3,100, I think that kind of vaults him somewhat into like play for me, but that's like a 1 in 150 type play.
So for myself, I actually am taking not very many, but a couple of shots on him. You brought up his name. If I'm going way off the board for Charlotte, I'd rather go to Isaiah Wong at $3,400. For one, he's actually scoring a fantasy point per minute this year, right around. So he's shown to be a pretty decent fantasy producer to this point. And then in addition to that, he's the direct leverage guy, in my opinion, off of Micic and Seth Curry. Because one of the things we saw the last game where Micic was really chalk and didn't have the best fantasy outcome, a large reason why, or the main reason why, was because he only played 25 minutes in that game. One of the reasons he only played 25 minutes is because Isaiah Wong was playing better than him off the bench. So they just kind of split the minutes between the two of them. If Wong goes out, and this is like a really, really low percentage outcome sort of thing, but if Wong comes off the bench and plays really well, you could see a scenario where that was to happen again. So I think Wong at $3,400, if I had to pick one guy, he's the cheap leverage guy that I think I can make a case for.
Okay. Yeah, I think that he probably makes the more sense, but just thinking about builds where you need the 300, where you're getting to some more of the studs and again, it's a large field play, but just to kind of round out Charlotte, I do have him in the pool. So out of my 150, he'll be in like a handful, just as like direct leverage off of that Seth Curry.
And let's see. I see we got some super chats that came in. I do see that Big Fact said KJ Simpson was the guy who played good off the bench that game. Isaiah Wong, if I'm not mistaken, Isaiah Wong that game played 22 minutes, scored 24.5 fantasy points, but he also plays the same position as Micic. So it's not to say that I don't even remember what KJ Simpson did that game, but he wasn't the guy who took the minutes away from Isaiah Wong, away from Micic. It was Isaiah Wong in that particular game.
So it was the identical matchup that we saw Micic fail at. It's against Philly. It was at home. He had 5 turnovers really, really quickly, and they kind of went to just kind of by committee more so than it was. Wong didn't appear in that game for what it's worth. The first time that we had like mega chalk Micic.
No, the last time that he.
Oh, the last time it was. Okay, okay. Last time it was. Yep.
The last time Micic was really popular was the game against the Bulls on December 3rd.
He had 22 minutes from Isaiah Wong in that one. Yep.
Yeah. And he played well in those minutes.
Yep, he did.
So, like I said, I'm much getting to more of Micic, but that's just the leverage option. Some lineups that don't have Micic. Chris Williams says, just atoning, and everyone do the same. It just requires hitting the like button, bring yourself some of that good karma. And then Chris Williams also gifted out 5 YouTube memberships, as well as SC. So both SC and Chris Williams, thank you guys very much for supporting the channel. We do appreciate it. And per what Chris said, the easiest way to support us, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You could also support us by signing up for a Stokastic membership. Links down below in the YouTube description box. And I know this is an NBA show, but we do have an NFL promo going on right now. We had over the weekend, did you see on Sunday, Eric, Aaron Costa won $1 million? Did you see that?
I sure did. He is kind of good at the old DFS over on FanDuel. He absolutely put the smack down a little bit, pretty darn close. We had the boss man sitting there on the screen. We also had the Colts, Steve Buzzard, for the people who know. He also was right up there. But Aaron Costa just continuing this insane run. Love to see it.
Yeah, he's been killing it on DraftKings as well this year, but he won $1 million on FanDuel. So because he won the $1 million, and also because we've got the holidays coming up next week, if you guys sign up for an NFL Max Pack and use the promo code CELEBRATE, you get access for the rest of the year for more than 50% off. The reason it's more than 50% off is because you're getting our Max subscription for the entirety of the rest of the season, all the way through the Super Bowl. So this is getting you nearly 2 full months of our Max package for less than the price of 1 month. So if you guys are looking to play NFL DFS, not just for the coming weeks, but through the playoffs, through the Super Bowl, sign up for our Max package using that promo code CELEBRATE. Get yourself a really good discount. And there's so much football coming up. We've got Saturday football this weekend, and we've got, Lofty broke it down, something like 8 of the next 13 days, there's NFL slate. So it's a really good value to be getting in on our NFL package right now. And sign up with that promo code CELEBRATE. Get yourself a discount. Or at 14 left us a super chat and says, play Andre Jackson Jr. over the 3K guys or fade on DK. Eric, what are you doing with Andre Jackson? And then we'll talk about Giannis a little bit as well.
Yeah, before we get to that, Joel Embiid is going through pregame warmup right now. He came out, but he's not wearing a mask. Like if you're going through pregame warmup to play, wouldn't you try taking some shots with the mask on and like having that feel out the way that it, this is just driving me insane. But he is going through it. I'm looking at Austin Krell, who covers the Sixers. He just posted the video of it. But Joel Embiid's out there in sweats, and he's just going through like a normal warm-up. So there's that. But again, I feel like he would have a mask on, or at least like be testing that out. So I find that to be a little bit strange. I've just been hawking this over on X.
Also, there was a report from an ESPN reporter said that Joel Embiid is expected to play today. Nick Nurse also said that he was probably going to be out there playing. So I assume that Joel Embiid plays.
I know it's not the first time, but it's the first time in a while that he's worn a mask. I'm so tilted by this news. I'm so tilted by Joel Embiid. Be a competitor, bro. Be a competitor. Just play tomorrow. Because he's going to sit tomorrow. He's going to sit tomorrow now. If he's playing today,
he's not playing in back-to-backs anymore.
I don't get it. All right, Andre Jackson. I'm going to move on until we find out news and get the official status there. But he's fine. He's just kind of showing up in lineups randomly. It's under the assumption he starts. I have him in 8% right now. Shooting guard, small forward, 3,300. I wouldn't call him like a pivot off of the other 3K guys. I'd just be playing all the other ones. I'd be playing Misic. I'd be playing Seth Curry before I got to Andre Jackson as like a quote unquote priority. He's way down the totem pole in 3K. Like I like Delon Wright a lot more, assuming that he starts.
Yeah, I only have 3% of Andre Jackson, and you know, he's had a couple of good fantasy games here and there. I get it's a small slate, so you can make a case for plugging Andre Jackson in the event that one of the Charlotte guy fails. But there's just so many better fantasy producers available for cheap. And I know that even though he's going to be in all likelihood in the starting lineup because he typically starts for the Bucks, he's only averaging 12.4 fantasy points as a starter this year. And this isn't that far removed from his normal role. Is the more usage available? To an extent, but Chris Middleton's back, and he's going to be playing some more minutes now as well. So Andre Jackson, to me, is, especially if you're only playing 1, 2, 3 lineups, I wouldn't play Andre Jackson, any of them.
Agreed.
All right. No other super chats came in. So let's talk about what to do with Giannis then, Eric, because he is the very popular pay up option on the slate. He is projected for 73% ownership on DraftKings. He's projected for 67% ownership on FanDuel. We have all the value in the world to be able to spend up for really whoever we want. The guy the field is spending up for, it is Giannis. Who are you going to be spending up for? Will you be spending up for Giannis, or is there somebody else you prefer as a top spend up option?
No, it's Giannis. He has power forward center eligibility. There's no Damian Lillard. He's just projecting abnormally well. I mean, he's already a 1.65 DraftKings points per minute producer under all circumstances. And then you take Damian Lillard off the floor and that assist rate shoots up. Everything starts to go for a ride. He just looks absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know what you're supposed to do in one lineup. If you like, you can always make a case, hey, with these constraints and these other things, like he only goes from like over the course of the sample size with Damian Lillard from like a 1.65 to a 1.67 DraftKings points per minute guy. Yeah, but he's got a 39.2% assist rate. I would assume you might give him a couple of more minutes too without Dame out there. There are lots of ways where I would try to get different on this slate. I don't think fading Giannis is one of them. They are on a back-to-back for what it's worth, so there's that. But they play Washington tomorrow. I don't think you need Giannis to play Washington tomorrow. It's the same kind of case I'm trying to make for Embiid, so there's that. But Damian Lillard, I'm pretty sure, sitting at home so that he can fire it up tomorrow against Washington.
Yeah, I have. So Giannis is my most rostered pay up option. He's in about half my lineups. Half my lineups, though, is kind of a good amount underweight to the field. And it's not because of the fact that I think cash games play Giannis, and he is clearly the pay up option who should be projected for the most fantasy points. But on a 3-game slate, if I'm trying to find ways to differentiate my lineups from the field, it's kind of hard to do it by just playing Giannis and all the Charlotte guys. Because then it's like, oh, cool, I won, and I split with 50 other people for first place today. So I think Giannis, projection-wise, best pay-up option on the slate. But I think it's easier to get away from Giannis and play SGA or play Joel Embiid than it is to get away from the Charlotte guys and build a high upside lineup.
Yep, I would agree.
So with that said, I've got Giannis. Once again, he's my most rostered pay-up option, but he's in about half my lineup. So I'm a good amount underweight to the field to him. In turn, I'm overweight to the field on SGA. Relative to ownership, SGA is my favorite guy to be paying up for. Considering all the value on the slate, I'm kind of surprised SGA is barely over 20% owned. I'm
with you. I made a pretty sizable case for him yesterday. It looked really, really good after that first half. He was 2%, 2.5%, depending on what you were playing yesterday. And I thought there was a case to be made if you were going to play some of the value and we thought more value could show up. It did show up, even if it was like a lot later there with Precious Achiuwa. Larry Nance obviously was viable the whole day. Lots of different guys in the 3K range. And then, of course, Spencer Dinwiddie, Quentin Grimes became absolute fantastic smashes as well, had 100% of Dinwiddie, which, if you were to reverse engineer that, you want to get to some of those spend ups that other people just aren't going to get to when they're hitting crunch or when they're in the Sims tool and not really changing things around. And I thought SGA made sense there. I got competitive towards the end of that game, but still not like a crazy amount of workload for SGA. Ended up playing 36 minutes, but like SGA is going to be great here. I think he makes all the sense to be overweight too. 10-3, not a ton else to pay up for besides him and Giannis. And Joel Embiid, I got to think that there's even going to be limitations on him pending him playing. And, there's Tyrese Maxey who's going to be over like just way too expensive with Embiid in there. So it's going to be definitely Giannis SGA on a slate with tons of 3K, 4K players that we can rotate around.
Yeah, so for me, once again, no issues with Giannis. SGA is my favorite pay-up option relative to ownership. I'm about neutral to the field on Joel Embiid. There's such a negative bias against Embiid. I'm kind of surprised that he has 50% more ownership than SGA. You got SGA at 22%. Then you got Joel Embiid at 33% projected ownership here. And then we've got a super chat here related to another one of the pay-up options on the 76ers. Keith Wilson wants to know, is Maxey viable? I'm not going to tell you I have 0% of him, but I have only a couple of lineups with Tyrese Maxey. If I was hand building a lineup or two, I wouldn't play Maxey. Confirmation, by the way, Joel Embiid will play today. Tyrese Maxey's price is if Joel Embiid was going to be out. So he's a very poor points per dollar play. My preference is to not roster him. Eric, thoughts?
None. Just beside myself.
Yeah, so Keith asked us, is Maxey viable? Are you playing Maxey at all?
4%.
All right. Yeah, that's more or less what I have. If I was playing 20 lineups today, Maxey wouldn't be in any of them. Next question. Oh, and then he said, should I run it back with some 76ers? So I get what he's asking here. He's trying to figure out, he's playing a bunch of Charlotte players. Who should he play from the 76ers on the other side? I mean, the guy that makes the most sense is Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
Another one too, who, if you want to go lower owned, I prefer Paul George to Tyrese Maxey. I think it's a pretty reasonable spot for Paul George. Paul George, $8,500. That's not an exorbitant price tag. Small forward, power forward, good position eligibility, and only 8% owned. If I wanted to get different on the Philly side of the game, it's Paul George for me over Tyrese Maxey.
Yep.
Next question here is from Del Toro 428i. Wants to know FanDuel core plays for a GPP. Yes. By the way, I have lineups. Now I kind of regret it because.
No Curry starting in the Hornets lineup that just came out. Micic, Martin, Green, Bridges, Richards. That is going to drastically change things for me because, there's going to be minutes for Seth Curry, but he did play 32 yesterday. It was definitely a concern of mine that they would try to maybe limit him to some extent. Now, you can't limit him entirely with this roster, with the way that it's constructed, but him coming off the bench is going to drastically reduce him. It's 28 minutes still to go. We'll see where the field ends up on him. He's still viable, no doubt about it. He's 3K with lack of guard options there, but he is definitely going to pale in comparison to what he was before.
So, couple things here. Let's answer this super chat. Then we'll give this a couple minutes. We'll look at our ownership projections, and we'll talk more about the implications of the starting line for the Charlotte Hornets and how you and I want to handle it. First, though, we did get the super chat from Del Toro. Wants to know FanDuel core plays for a GPP. It's funny. I was about to say to you, Eric, as this news came out, that this earlier today, I wanted to play on both DraftKings and FanDuel. 3-game slate. You figure there's probably not that much news. I like some of the contests on both sites. But what ended up happening is with Joel Embiid being questionable all day, I just didn't want to get stuck in a scenario where Embiid was ruled out 10 minutes before lock, and then I have to update lineups for both sites, and it was a whole mess. So I was going to say to you that because Embiid was in, I kind of regretted that I only built out lineups for FanDuel but didn't actually reserve entries. And then what ends up happening just a couple minutes later is we get the weird Hornets starting lineup and like, oh, okay. It ends up working out that I don't have to update lineups for both sites right before lock here. But now that Seth Curry is not going to be starting, let's go through our core plays for FanDuel for our guy here, Del Toro 428i, and we'll see. Is Seth Curry somebody who we are going to want to be getting to as a core player? I still like Seth Curry, but at least for FanDuel at $3,600, he's not going to be somebody that I'm going to call a core play as a top guy to roster at each position. Point guard is still Micic for me, though, on FanDuel.
I would have like next to zero of Seth Curry. But yeah, Micic still number one. Point guard, shooting guard. So he looks outrageous on FanDuel.
Shooting guard. I already was getting to a good amount of Cody Martin. And this really solidifies it. Small forward, shooting guard, Cody Martin at $5,100. Micic is the shooting guard I overall have the most. I've already mentioned him at point guard. So Cody Martin at shooting guard.
Yeah, Cody Martin, shooting guard.
Small forward for me, that is going to be Jalen Williams.
Miles Bridges.
Power forward for me, that is Giannis. And then finally at center for me over on FanDuel. I mean, it's Evan Mobley, but a lot of that's because of the amount of power forward I have of him. So instead, that is going to be Brook Lopez at $5,300.
It's going to be Isaiah Hartenstein for me.
All right. There we have it. And then we will be on the lookout for any projections updates. We'll give you guys those as soon as they come across with this new starting lineup for the Hornets. But right away, Eric, I know you kind of gave your initial thoughts on Seth Curry. And yeah, clearly we're going to be getting less of him now than we did before. There's no doubt about it. There was only one way for him to go once he wasn't starting, and that was down. But how does this impact some of the other players on the Hornets? Whether it's Josh Green or Cody Martin, are these guys who become more prominent plays for you now that Seth Curry is going to the bench?
Not only that, I think there's a chance that we don't even see Seth Curry play. So I'm probably going to end up playing nearly 0% of him. We'll see what happens. I doubt I play 150 lineups and don't have some of him, but I want to be on high alert to the case that want to be on high alert for potentially playing some of these other bench Charlotte pieces. With Embiid in, I mean, this is obviously just a spread that, I mean, they should just clobber Charlotte. This is just so dumb. And so I think Seth Curry, 3K, getting away from that to a pretty extreme amount is what I'm going to be doing. I don't know what else is going to show up for me here as far as Cody Martin, because like FanDuel, we talked about a 5,100 there. I think that that's fine. On DK at 5,200 small forward only, if that ownership comes up, that's just dicey. When you can only fall into like 3 specific lineups there, small forward, utility, your outs are very limited. And if the ownership gets up there in a pronounced way just to react to him starting, he's still north of 5K. It's still pretty exorbitant for him. But again, the floor of minutes on Seth Curry is way down there. And I think he'll still garner some ownership. So I think this became like an anti-Seth Curry slate for me.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at what our projections were, and then if you change them to, say, 25 minutes coming off the bench, all of a sudden you get Seth Curry around 18 fantasy points, and still certainly playable at 3K, but assuming that he's going to be popular, he's just not going to be, I assume, at least when I rerun everything, he won't be a core piece of my lineup. So he'll be somebody I get some exposure to, but I mean, he was in like, what was the number before? He was in 80-something% of my lineups. Now that number is probably going to be, I don't know, like 15%-ish or something like that.
Yep. I bet I have less when it's all said and done. I'm just about to hit something here on the minutes. I'm just tweaking them here in the Sims, and I'm going to let it rock. I doubt I get to that much of him.
And let's see if the projections are updated on the site. And then once they are, I will run the Sims. Let's see. We do have an update. Would you mind throwing this on screen, Jacob? Go to the Charlotte Hornets and their projections. We will see where Seth Curry came in. And yeah, you'll see right here, we now have Seth Curry in for 25 minutes, which is about what I was thinking was reasonable. And 25 minutes, we have him for 17.5 fantasy points. It's not an unplayable projection, but relative to what his ownership is likely to still be, he's just not a great GPP option anymore.
Yeah, BD just said in the chat, he won't be popular not starting. That's not the point. The point is that people have had lineups built all day. There's still, even if that's only 10% of people these days, there are people who have put Seth Curry in a placeholder or read an article somewhere that said Seth Curry was a play, or saw a cheat sheet in a Discord that says, oh, Seth Curry at 3K. Like, there's lots of ways that a Seth Curry is still popular, especially as you go down in stakes. As you go up in stakes, I bet there's a world where we see that ownership come down. Even though, like, I do think high stakes, he'll still end up garnering some attention because he's a flat 3K, and there's an opportunity cost with some of the hand builds that I've looked at. I'm only playing my 150 set today. So it's a little bit different than normal for me, where I'll build out a couple of like by hand ones. I just didn't like any of the builds that I was looking at. And obviously with the Embiid news pending, I didn't want to be on the show holding the bag because I'm already invested in a bad way against it. But I am getting myself away from Seth Curry. I have 8% of him. So I know that's been a popular number for me today, but I'm sub 10%, single digits on Seth Curry now.
Let's see what questions we have in the Discord. And from Discord, we have, I'm just kind of assuming that there's questions that are in Discord. All right, there are. All right, first, JEW, favorite or must plays for DK single entry and players you are over or under on for mini max exposure. So JEW, favorite plays for DK single entry. Yeah, I would say not playing Seth Curry at this point. I know that's not exactly the way that we usually frame these things, but I would say not playing Seth Curry. It's still a choice.
It's better advice than probably telling you who to play, although SGA is probably that guy for both of us.
Yeah, I like SGA as a pivot off of Giannis. Also, I wonder what this does to Giannis's ownership, because I haven't rerun my lineups, but I figure he's a little bit more difficult to get to now that we're missing a 3K value option.
No. We got Nuke of the Night coming, baby. We got Nuke of the Night. Nuke of the Night is going to give you guys an opportunity to party, I think. I got a guy. Do we have the graphic?
You don't think his ownership comes down from this?
It probably comes down, but it's not going to come down for me because I am playing a terrible basketball player.
Okay. So anyway, for JW, other must plays for single entry. So guys will consider really strong single entry options. Still, Micic is chalk. I say play him. I like SGA as a pay up option as opposed to going to Giannis. I think that's a reasonable pivot point. You can also make a case for Joel Embiid at single entry, but I slightly prefer SGA. Who else? Who else are we going to call? Miles Bridges, by the way. Definitely play Miles Bridges in single entry. Who else, Eric? Who else are we going to consider strong single entry options for JEW?
We got to play the graphic then. Nuke of the Night. Do it.
All right. Jacob, play the nuke. All right, Eric didn't want to give away the goods without first seeing the Nuke of the Night animation play. So I want to know from you, Eric, who is it that you have in mind that you're about to tell JEW should be playing in single entry tonight?
It's not Daquan Jeffries, so you can rest easy, but don't rest too easy because I'm going to recommend a center play who is $3,200. And we know very, very much so that Joel Embiid likes to take advantage and go nuts in some of these terrible, terrible matchups. So have fun, Joel Embiid. Enjoy your couple of rotations. When you're up 20, though, in the fourth quarter, it's Moussa Diabate season, friends. 3,200 for Diabate right now, sub 20% ownership. And when you're missing one of these core centers, like you had both centers that were out for quite some time. Nick Richards, he played 17 minutes yesterday. What are like 24 minutes? I mean, we're still looking at basically like a 50-50 split potentially here, like 24-24 for the center position. Yeah, they could go small, but you can't really do that if it's Drummond backing up Embiid here. And, you know, even Yabusele out there, I think you're going to get Diabate out on the floor. He hasn't been like an insane fantasy producer by any means, but he's been more than serviceable. And I think you're walking into like 24, potentially the lion's share of minutes, considering some of the injury issues that they've had here at center. There's just a lot of ways, whether it's blowout, whether it's, you know, the 17 minutes Richards played yesterday. I believe this is also Nick Richards' first back-to-back all season long. So there's lots of ways, friends, where I think Moussa Diabate, 3,200, ends up being your nuke of the night.
By the way, updated ownership. Seth Curry, he's come down in ownership, but he's still 47% owned. So Field's still playing him in about half of the lineups. I don't remember. Do you remember what he was before?
He's like 50%, 58%.
Interesting. So he's come down like 10% coming off the bench.
Yeah, I'm going to play
still
like
very
next
popular
out of him. Yeah.
Still very, very popular, Seth Curry. Boy, so what direction do I want to go in then? I've got a set of sims running right now for the updated ownership, and I'll see what ends up looking different when that comes through. I'm trying to think if I could go in a direction. I've kind of like, because SGA, I do like him as a pivot point, but I've kind of already talked about him a little bit. I'll go in a different direction. Here's another way that I think you get some leverage off of Giannis. How about playing Bobby Portis tonight? Bobby Portis, we know he's a great fantasy producer. His minutes are nearly impossible to predict out. You don't know what's going to happen with Bobby Portis. Like, the least he's played the entire season was a game that Giannis was out, just inexplicably, for absolutely no reason. So with that in mind, where you just get this wide range of outcomes with the minutes of Bobby Portis, maybe this is a spike game for Portis, and we get one of those games where he plays like 28 to 30 minutes, and they rely on a little bit more to bring more offense to the table because Damian Lillard's out. So Bobby Portis, I actually have him in 40% of my lineups, Eric. I can't tell you I feel great about the Bobby Portis exposure I have, just because there's such a clear path where you can just play 22 minutes and it goes poorly. But there's a clear upside there, and that's what I want to bank on, especially because in lineups that don't have Giannis, one of the ways that maybe it doesn't go all that well for Giannis is maybe they just get their ass kicked by Cleveland in a game that Damian Lillard's out, and then Bobby Portis gets some extended run off the bench. But Bobby Portis, $5,400. There's an upside for him. He's not all that popular either. That is going to be my nuke of the night, Eric. Are you getting yourself to Bobby Portis lineups at all?
Yeah, he's nearly 30% owned. So, I mean, it's not like he's unowned by any means. And without Damian Lillard on the floor, they're going to need some extra offense. He's basically all you got. You know, I like certain pieces out there for Milwaukee. Like, I like AJ Green in a capacity, but he's not going to create his own shots. He gets shots created for him. Like, it's one of those things. I do think there's a chance also Chris Middleton starts here, which I think probably helps out Bobby Portis rather than playing alongside him. Although Chris Middleton's assist rate's been up a little bit. I think one of the telltale things for me on what will probably end up happening, and there's not a ton of late swap stuff that we have to talk about. We have like 1 hour of it, but every piece of news is important. If you get Delon Wright, Chris Middleton, Taurean Prince, or, you know, maybe Taurean Prince doesn't start. It could be Delon Wright, Andre Jackson, and you know, I think there's a world though where Chris Middleton ends up falling into that starting unit potentially. That would make it kind of interesting to me to really fire up Bobby Portis, because him getting the whole second unit or some extra blowout run or something like that as you're kind of laying out there. It also could be like they play his minutes by year, considering they play Washington tomorrow. you'd kind of like Dame and Bobby Portis to go into a game and maybe rest Giannis there in that spot. But me and resting stars right now, I'm not exactly in line with it. So I'm going to definitely be looking at some Bobby Portis, 35% of my lineups right now.
Yeah, reran my lineups. I'm still getting to a lot of Seth Curry, so I'm trying to dial that back a little bit. Unfortunately, it's a little harder to get off of him than I would like it to be, but I'm trying to lower it. My first run of Sims, I still had him in 70% of lineups, so trying to find guys to boost to dial it back.
That would be good.
With the potential here of us trying to get off of Seth Curry, I know you brought up Diabate. Who are some of the other cheap options we could consider as pivots to Curry?
It's not even like pivoting. I'm just like getting to builds that don't need a 3K flat guy alongside a 3,200 Diabate. Like Diabate can do enough of it for me. I think Isaiah Joe at 3,400 is really interesting. Case and Wallace went back into the starting lineup. They could just start Isaiah Joe again today. They started him in the NBA Cup game. I think that anytime you get like that late piece of news where Isaiah Joe could step into a starting lineup out of the middle of nowhere when you don't expect it, that's viable. And, Case and Wallace, hey, he played a bunch of minutes yesterday. Let's go to some more Isaiah Joe and hope he gets hot right away, can spread the floor and do all the things Isaiah Joe does. Not known for his defense, that's for sure. But if you get Delon Wright out there, don't you just put Isaiah Joe over there on an island on Delon Wright and not worry about it so much? That's how I'd feel if I were coaching. And I think that Isaiah Joe is just like one of those really low-owned pieces, sub 7%, 8%. I don't know what he just changed to. But I currently had 24% of him. He's somebody I had projected a little bit better.
All right. So I did tinker around with my lineups and I got my exposure to Seth Curry down. The one direct thing that happens, though, if you lower Seth Curry, it brings your Giannis exposure down a good amount. It does make it way more difficult to get to Giannis. So what ended up happening when I reduced my exposure to Seth Curry, my exposure to Giannis went down. And then in turn, my exposure to guys like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and Donovan Mitchell went up as secondary stars. So that's kind of the opportunity cost, is if you don't want to be playing as much of Seth Curry, you're going to lose some Giannis exposure. It just becomes more difficult to get to.
Agreed.
Super chat from Jeff Williams wants to know, who's the best small forward play on DraftKings? I have the most exposure to Cody Martin of any small forward.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to happen, and I don't like it very much. I have Aaron Wiggins the most, but I don't want that either. I'll probably deal with that after the show because we've got Chris Middleton, Aaron Wiggins. I think they're both interesting. The one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to limit how much Cody Martin I get to, because if he ends up like 30%, 25, 30%, again, he only fits into like three spots.
18% ownership.
If that's going to be the case, then yeah, we're going to have to play some Cody Martin. But if that ownership ends up a little bit higher, I would be really, really, really ticked that I played chalky Cody Martin at that price tag. Not a great fantasy producer, although you're missing your two best fantasy producers in Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. So I guess tick for tat a little bit. It's more so that like what could potentially emerge. And obviously I think there's worlds where you get more minutes for an Aaron Wiggins, you get more minutes for Isaiah Joe, my dude. I don't want to go crazy with Cody Martin the way that I might go crazy with some other pieces of value later down the line.
So we just got another ownership update. So I'm going to have to rerun my lineups again. Okay. Seth Curry's ownership has now come down a lot. He's now at 30% as opposed to close to 50%. Is that going to change your opinion on Seth Curry at all?
Yeah, I'm going to rerun it. And I always do it side by side, kind of have like the boom bust tool idea. And I've got something that I kind of do where I run it through it and we'll find out. But I just know the way that it kind of does this. And I'll probably get to, over 10% Seth Curry now, but there's no way I'm going to get to 30% of him.
Yeah. Refresh that page there, Jacob, because we do have a fresh run of ownership. And you guys will see here now the updated ownerships. And we'll do this for DraftKings as well as FanDuel. Yeah. So this is what I assume is going to be. Did I not just see him at? Let me check this again.
Dean Wade starting. So we got the exact starting lineup we were expecting from Cleveland. Max Strus is in, but he's coming off the bench.
Seth Curry. Oh, you know what? I was looking at Seth Curry's FanDuel ownership is at 30%. So he's 30% on FanDuel, still at 40% on DraftKings, though still slightly lower than it was before. But I'm going to rerun everything through the Sims and see where I end up getting to everybody now in this latest updated ownership. Micic has gone up. He's now projected for 88% ownership. He's not actually going to be 88% owned. He's just so far projected as the best points per dollar play that he ends up showing up that high in our ownership projections. But yeah, Cody Martin actually is at 52% now, whereas he was not anywhere near that level before.
No, thank you.
All right, time to run everything through again. I don't like my I don't know there's anything I could do to make me like my lineups.
I don't know if there's anything that can make me like today. Today sucks. Like just today, the day that is Friday. But hey, that's the best part about today is it's Friday. Cheers, everybody. Happy holidays.
We did have, circling back on that super chat from Jeff Williams, now that Martin is this much more popular in our last ownership update, does it change your answer for your favorite small forward is?
It was never Cody Martin. So
did you not answer? I thought you said Cody Martin before and Aaron Wiggins.
Yeah, Aaron Wiggins was number one, and no, number two was Chris Middleton.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see. Going into Discord, we do have a couple questions here about Aaron Wiggins. The process wants to know how much Aaron Wiggins are we playing? And then we also got a question from M. Grizzly wants to know what are our thoughts on Aaron Wiggins? Thoughts are that his minutes, very wide range of outcomes. He's not the best fantasy producer in the world, but he's a lower owned pivot option off of, say, like a Seth Curry, and he plays a position that's just really difficult to fill today. More than anything, that's the key, is just the position he plays at small forward. It's not a loaded position today, and that's where it just kind of makes sense. Like, hey, I'll just play this guy who's really cheap at this position. If he scores 15 fantasy points and the more expensive guys kind of all suck, then maybe he lands himself in an optimal lineup. I don't think there's a massive ceiling for Wiggins, though.
No, there's not. But he's 3,100. He fits into lineups. I get access to a guy that is going to help me pivot off of a super chalky piece that I don't really like at his current ownership. And I'll be able to react to a starting lineup that could or could not come out the exact same way as yesterday. They got Case, like I assumed during the NBA Cup, Case and Wallace was going to start. They started Isaiah Joe. Then I assumed they were going to start Isaiah Joe. They started Case and Wallace. And there's no reason that they can't do whatever they want. It could be Wiggins today, for the love of God. We've seen that at times. So there's no need for whoever that fifth starter is to figure it out. I'll just kind of figure it out later. And Aaron Wiggins is one piece to do that.
Yeah, seeing it a lot in chat of people trying to figure out, hey, how do I get off Seth Curry? How do I get off Seth Curry? So I assume this is going to be my final set of lineups here. And I have Seth Curry in 29% of lineups, which a little bit underweight to the field to him. I'm good with that being the number that I have on him. But Alucard wants to know, who is our favorite shooting guard that is not Seth Curry for today? Donovan Mitchell for me.
Same favorite one that isn't what?
He wants to know who our favorite shooting guard is that isn't Seth Curry. He's trying to play anybody else at the shooting guard position.
It is Lou Dort at the moment for me.
It's ugly. It's ugly out there.
Have fun. Click a name. We got to do it.
Are there any other cheap guys? Well, I guess Lou Dort is fairly cheap, but anybody who's in the punt range that you potentially like as opposed to Seth Curry?
Pull this up here. I'm just kind of doing the side-by-side thing. I don't like the fact that it's Chris Middleton as much as what it is, but I'm hoping I can get more of that to this. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's a small forward spot or not there. He just fits into 5 different spots in your DraftKings lineups. And Chris Middleton, there's a world where he starts. I don't think it's likely, but I would like to get to Chris Middleton no matter what in some capacity. I don't know if I want to get to 48% of him, which is what I currently have. He's 25% owned. Again, I'm just kind of planning to deal with that after the show. And it's hard to know exactly what it's going to be, but I think Chris Middleton pretty safely will be in my top 3.
Andre Rules wants to know what are our thoughts on Delon Wright as a single entry play. I'm well overweight to the field on Wright. I like him a good amount as a punt play. He to me is the easiest pivot to make in the guard spot to get off Seth Curry.
Yes, he is very much who I'm going to be playing and hoping starts because people, I mean, if you're using the Sims, you're going to get to Delon Wright. So that's cool. I'm also playing Diabate, who I think looks awesome today. Yeah, it's pretty much it.
Next question is from Einsteinium. On this slate, why is Middleton pulling a little more than 3x the ownership of LeVert? And then should we be playing more LeVert today? So the Cavs are healthy now. They are getting Max Strus back. I don't think there's that many minutes available for LeVert anymore.
Not as many as there were before. They also have Craig Porter Jr., who's back. So he had played pretty decently well at the beginning of the season. At the tail end of last year, we actually saw him at times in the playoff rotation where Craig Porter Jr. would mix in. George Niang's there. Sam Merrill's, another year there, can be shooting off the bench and play better alongside a Garland or a Mitchell individually. They're just not a lot of minutes for Caris LeVert as what there were before, whereas Chris Middleton is only going to see his minutes climb up, and he's only going to see his opportunity climb up. He's got a good fantasy point per minute rate over the course of his career and over the course of the last year and a half when healthy, which is rare. But Chris Middleton looks way better than Caris LeVert.
Yeah, and LeVert's also kind of expensive. Like it's hard to think he plays much more than 20 minutes, and he's not a fantastic fantasy producer. So with that being the case, I mean, it's just hard to project LeVert for much more than like 22, 23 fantasy points and over 5K. It's just not a guy who I'm going to end up landing on. I was getting a lot of questions and all that long about Ty Jerome betting him for 6th man of the year. And here was always the same issue LeVert's going to be running into right now. It's where are the minutes for Ty Jerome? Like Ty Jerome might not even be in the rotation going forward.
Yep.
Cedric wants to know if Ryan Rollins is active tonight for the Milwaukee Bucks. Yes, Ryan Rollins is active.
Fun.
Let's see. What is our projection on Ryan Rollins? We have Ryan Rollins projected for, who, by the way, Ryan Rollins is also live to, we only put him in for 1 minute. I don't think it's the most likely scenario, but he started before in this situation for Milwaukee. So he's a potential starter. I don't think he is going to be the starter, but it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if he ended up starting.
No, it would definitely not be.
A couple more questions that came in here. We've got an active guru wants to know top 2 favorite plays at each position on DK. So let's wrap up with this, Eric. Now that we've got our final lineups here uploaded, I want to know, who is it that you are getting the most exposure to at point guard? For me, it is Micic and Delon Wright.
Micic and Delon Wright.
Shooting guard for me, it's Mitchell and Seth Curry. The caveat being that I'm underweight to the field on Seth Curry, though.
I'm way under the field to Seth Curry in my last run. It is, who is number 1 for me? It is all Chris Middleton right now.
All right. Small forward for me, that is Cody Martin and Aaron Wiggins.
Chris Middleton by a country mile.
All right. And now the power forward position.
Giannis
power forward for me, that is Miles Bridges and Giannis.
Yeah, Giannis by a lot.
And now finally at center for me, that ended up being Giannis and Nick Richards. I got a good amount of Nick Richards.
Love a little bit of Diabate. A lot of bit of Giannis still, but yeah, Diabate is number 2 for me.
All right. And guys, that is going to bring us to lock here. If you have not done yet, do us a big favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to check out our betting tools, we've also got a holiday deal, not just for NFL package, but also for Portfolio EV. If you guys want to sign up for our Portfolio EV tools, they are 50% off with the promo code GIFTEV. These are the tools that I use for myself, my own bets. If you guys follow my bankroll thread that I've been doing over on Twitter, these are the tools that I use for this. 50% off. Promo code GIFTEV. So just check out with that promo code when you sign up. Use that link down below in the YouTube description box. If you're somebody who's into betting, these are the tools for you. It's nothing easier to use. You enter your bankroll. It tells you what to bet. It tells you how much to bet on all those bets as well. Promo code GIFTEV. Get yourself 50% off. Now, Josh and I are going to head on over to Playback. Come join us. We're still waiting on the Bucs starting lineup. That could really substantially change the slate. So come join Josh and I over on Playback. I'll see you guys there.